Okay, so welcome to this little webinar. And my name is Marianne Braca. I'm going to be talking about a few different ideas that you can use in your classroom related to geography, related to place, and everything else in between. Before we begin, I'd like to talk about the land acknowledgement. So where I am, I would like to acknowledge the people who were here before me, before the settlers, who are the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Wendat in certain regions, as well as neutral people in and around this region. It's incredibly important, especially when we're looking at things that have to do with place, geography, to really recognize what kind of, who was here before, the history of the place and the importance of place to different people. So I hope we continue to understand and honor the contributions and stewardship of land and water of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Wendat neutral people in this region to our communities, past, present, and future. I also want to talk about all of you. If you're in a different region than me, obviously, many of you are, I want you to think about the people who you share a treaty with and what that means and what you can do to help foster that for the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people in this land that is here. Yeah, okay. So if you don't know the treaty you're part of, I'm part of Treaty 29. I really want you to go out and figure out what that means. And I have a feeling that many of you, because you're Canadian Geographic people, you would already know what treaty you're part of and what that means for the future. So who I am. The introduction, I am Marianne Braca. I have been teaching for 22 years. I live in Southwestern Ontario in Stratford, and it is right by the Stratford Festival. So if you've never been to the Stratford Festival, it's the Shakespearean Festival. Come on out and see us. It's a wonderful small city. I guess what this whole presentation is about my shift in teaching and different ways that I've taught. I take a look at the pandemic and how that's affected me in my teaching, but also what I started from, what I went to, and what I've come back to. I transitioned over time. I remember my very first year teaching, my very first interview, I remember, and it wasn't a great question in hindsight, now that I'm looking at it. Somebody said, the principal said, do you consider yourself a free spirit? And I kind of said, yeah, I guess I do. And it was all, the streaming is still loading for me. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat here. Is the stream okay for all of you? Okay, thanks, Kelly. I'm going to keep going, and then you can take a look at it later, Lydia, if you're having troubles with that. So I transitioned over time. They asked me if I was a free spirit, and I definitely said yes, and not really thinking that that was a bad thing. But I guess when certain people like teaching to be very rules and regulation and by the book and everything else, they think that free spirit doesn't equate to control of the classroom and things like that. If you walked into my class, I would have to say I have pretty good classroom management skills, but that is also fostered from great relationships, as I'm guessing many of you know or will learn very soon. The free spirit aspect, I went to school for geography, and my teachables are geography and outdoor experiential ed. So that's where that comes from. I like doing things in a different way than other people, and I love the outdoors and geography. I also consider myself a recovering environmentalist, which many of you also might consider yourselves. The recovering part is because I was part of all of these clubs in high school and elementary, all these enviro clubs, and everything was put onto the person. And oh my goodness, if I couldn't do something about it in our individualistic ways, then how in the world will anything get better? So a lot of the environmental responsibility was put on us as individuals, and I kept hitting a brick wall with that. Also, in my teaching, oh yeah, the guilt, right? And I was kind of done with that. I couldn't go any further. I had kind of given up in time, and I was thinking, I'm teaching all of my students about all these facts and everything else. And it's kind of that environmental fatigue. And what I've realized is that I'm recovering in a way that I'm looking at, you know what, the connections to the environment. Everybody I've talked to who is an environmentalist, even Emily Choi, who spoke first in the keynote, talked about her connection to the environment, and if we're able to bring that connection to our students, then that's one step up, because all of those people who cared for the environment had a connection as children or young adults with the environment, and I hope to foster that, and I'm going to hopefully give you ways to do that. So let's take a look. Sorry, there we go. So the pandemic happened, and I think as many of you, if you're here for obviously Canadian Geographic, you're going to see that, and you're probably going to be outside a lot more than the average person. Now, the average person also got outside as well, quite a bit. I was privileged to be outside with my son. This is a picture of my son here. He was 7 years old when the pandemic went down, and he's 10 years old now. So there's been a lot of changes in the last 3 years. I would post a lot of pictures of my son and I going outside all the time. And many of my friends said he was incredibly blessed to be outside, whereas other people weren't outside. I heard a lot, even from my own students, of being inside and on their games and sitting in their rooms and not getting that connection. And even though, remember those beginning days of the pandemic, we didn't have that connection with other people, but I was able to give the connection to the natural world to my son. Now, I also want to talk about my privilege of that, right? The privilege of having that security in my job, security of health and everything else, where a lot of people didn't have that. And I do want to acknowledge that. So I had that. I wanted to continue getting my students outside, because I didn't see it as fair that my own son was able to be outside, and I wanted to kind of give that to my students as well. So I during that time, I also picked up my camera. I'm going to read here. Students are certainly struggling with their sense of place and belonging. Yeah, they do need tangible learning, Chan, and creativity is key. Totally key. So I'm going to move on to the next slide and see if it works. It's kind of slow. There we go. So it was during this time, during the pandemic, I also, we had no time, but then we had a lot of time. I took some National Geographic PD, and if you ever have the chance, I'd go out, and if you have that time, I'd go out and do that, because there are a lot of great courses out there. I don't represent National Geographic at all. These are all of my takeaways, but I wanted to pass them on because they were kind of part of me moving toward these other kinds of projects. I took the Teaching Global Climate Change in Your Classroom using modeling. And I also took my National Geographic Educator certification, but then there was also a photography course, which is kind of key to everything. These are my photographs. These are just, honestly, they're like a stone's throw from my house. So you don't have to get far from your home in order to create these kinds of pictures and things like that. So I took a Storytelling for Impact course in my classroom, and it was a photography one. There's also audio as well as a visual. Now, the storytelling for photography course, I want to talk a little bit about that before I get into the other things and how I moved on from that. So this photography course, when you're doing this storytelling course, you need to go out, find a place that you love, and share 8 to 10 photos that show different perspectives of that place. So you're going to try to show the essence of what that place is. And if you could take photos to capture the smells, cultures, feelings of that place, what would you take photos of? So I use this photo assignment in my class when students were online. It was a way for students to go out and bring their world at the moment back to the classroom. And that connection, I think, is what a lot of people were struggling with in those times. So we did scavenger hunts and all those other things, but I also did this photography assignment, and they loved it. So the expectations: find a place that you love, share 8 to 10 photos that show different perspectives of that place. Remember, a lot of these students do this on Instagram anyway, that they have that 10 photo limit, and that's perfect for storytelling. If you take that photography course for National Geographic, there's a lot of videos that go along with how to do this. So I would go out and do this. So try to show the essence of the place, smells, cultures, feelings, all of that. And the photos had to be specifically for this assignment, and each of the photos is on its own slide. Okay, students are marked completing all aspects of the assignment and the different perspectives, but I didn't mark them on how well they took photographs, because it's not an art course. It's more about the places that they see and what they love, and trying to capture the essence of a place. So I'm going to show you a few that I got back. This is one student's assignment, David. They've all given me permission to share their assignments. So this is his cover page, but these are all of the other ones. Now I condensed it all. So yeah, he wrote about excitement. Okay, judging. Oh, this kind of slid over. I'm kind of missing this one here. You can't see this picture because of how it transferred to the PowerPoint. Observing, so his pet here. Procrastination, character. He talks about the old schoolhouse that he lived in. Cooking, prayer. So it shows a tree. And entertainment. So he did a great job at showing various perspectives of the one place. The presentation was fantastic, and it really captured the essence of the place that he calls home. He also, and again, keep in mind that they're sharing this with me, who is somebody removed from them that they've never met. A lot of them I've never even seen, right? I don't know if many of you did the online. I think a lot of you did. But with the older grades, you don't really get to see the students at all. So he did a fantastic job. This is another one. So the place I'm about to show you is the apartment building where I lived for most of my early life. I chose this place not because it holds a lot of memories, but also because my grandma still lives there and I visit once in a while. I knew from the beginning of this assignment that this apartment building was the perfect place to do. So, sorry, there we go. Oh, no. I'll go back. Okay, so another student here did an assignment of her grandmother's apartment building. Now, I also said that they could involve people in their photos. Again, we did a bit of, media literacy and ethics, and talking about, is it okay to take somebody's picture and use somebody's picture if they don't know? And hopefully this transfers to all of their social media kind of savvy. There was a picture on here of her grandmother and her grandmother's best friend, and it was lovely, but I told her I wouldn't share that. Just I didn't have the time to speak with her grandmother, so I didn't want to use her grandmother's photo without asking. So when you get these different assignments back, what you're going to realize, and not just with this photography one, but with the tin one later on that I'm going to talk about, that so many students live different realities. And I know that you all know that, but when you're getting these visuals and items back, you're going to realize this on a whole other level. Things you didn't know about them, and then you create these connections that are quite beautiful with your students. So what we find important in life, especially with these kinds of assignments, you're going to realize are so different, right? Some people value different things. I wouldn't get to see the variation of who my students are without these kinds of assignments. And yeah. Okay, so here's the next one. So she lived in an apartment building. My next student lives on a farm. I live in a rural region. And he says, our farm is one of my favorite places to be. It's because it's the only place I've ever lived. I like our bush because it's so beautiful in the fall. I'm very lucky to have 200 acres to grow up on. I'm proud to live where I do. And again, very unassuming student and incredibly creative with his photos. So you're going to get different kinds of things back that will amaze you. Okay, so this is, he actually, I think he climbed up, and yeah, it was quite something. So the smells of a farm, weed up close, the view of the farm, different places of the world, grain bins, spilled corn, Christmas star, and then the bush at the back. I gave these students time to do these kinds of assignments. Just so you know, if you're taking notes and want to do something like this, you have to think about the time of year, especially with where you are and what kinds of things are growing and what things might look like. You can get a lot of, if you're skilled, you can get some pretty beautiful photos showing different perspective in the winter. But if there's so much snow and it's basically just ice, snow, and not a lot of vegetation or animals have gone, you're going to find that it's not as dynamic, the different pictures. So next. During this time, after I've done this, I told you that I did that photography assignment. During pandemic, online, everything else, there was a shift in my teaching. I kind of went back to what I originally went into teaching for, is to do this hands-on, environmental, tactile type thing. Okay, so I was also online, social media. It can be horrible, absolutely horrible, but it can also be wonderful. Make sure you're, following the right people. And I had a lot of interaction with some wonderful educators online, some great ideas, great networking. And during this time, I happened upon an author who also is an artist. And she put out this photo. And if you scan this, you can go directly to the link. So if you have your phone on you, many of you probably do, scan that and you'll get a link of Tanya's write-up of this project that she did. So what she does, she had a near-death experience and she wrote a whole book about it. And it's wonderful. Go out and get it. She would collect pieces of a place to bring back and remember on her hardest days. So she went out and did that. And I figured, you know what, that's a little bit like the photo assignment that I did. So I wanted to kind of combine them both. And you're going to see that next. During the same time, we were back to in-person teaching, kind of. I had students for a full day, a full class, full day. So geography, one period. It was kind of crazy here in Ontario in those ways. I'm not sure how it was for the rest of the country, but it was similar, I think. We had some crazy educational setups. And I realized life is too short to learn solely out of a book. there's so much craziness happening that I wanted to figure out another way to teach. I wanted to make it worthwhile. And I wanted to also make the photography assignment a little more tangible. So this is me taking my students outside. This is a little spectrum. Science has these little cloud rings, things like this. So go outside and do that. I also recognize, like I said, I was a recovering environmentalist. I needed connection, and students need connection. And when they were thanking me for getting outside and doing these scavenger hunts that I sent them on, but also for the photography assignment, I don't think I've ever had students thank me for an assignment. It was because I made them go outside. I made them spend time outside, and they kind of grumbled initially, but they actually loved it. And a lot of them took their siblings out and things like that. So I recognize that my son was blessed to experience nature on a regular basis. And I believe that all students have the right to experience nature in their daily lives. I honestly think that's a right of all students. The grade level, grade 9. Sorry, Chan. Yeah, grade 9. But I'm going to give examples later on of people who have done these assignments with grade 3, 4, as well as grade 6. And I'm also going to be looking at certain things with my grade 12s as well. So stay tuned. If you can think right now, think about a place that you love and think about what 5 things you might collect, what small items you would collect to put inside a tin to capture the essence of a place. What place would you choose, and what items would you collect? Okay, so keep this in mind. This is kind of what I put out to my students. I gave them a little tiny tin, and here's a tin right here. I don't know if you can see it. I have a tin, and I'll tell you where to get them later. But I gave them a little tin, and it's always fun getting little things in class that are not paper. So they were excited to get these little tins. They were like, oh my gosh, I have my tin. And they went out, they were excited about filling them. Some kids brought them in the next day. But again, like I said, for the photography assignment, give them time to collect those things. They might change it up. And then obviously you have those procrastinators that will be there. And it's not switching. Okay. So the expectations for these tins, I gave them these tins. You're to find and include at least 5 different little things, and they have to be different. So a lot of them would maybe come back with like 5 rocks. And it's like, you know what, how about you go and try that again? The items must be found in the moment, not something that they have already from a previous trip. And they can be connected to the place that was photographed that they did. They don't have to be connected to that place at all. And the reason being is that some kids did things like quarries. Now, they did find a few things, but quarries, like gravel quarries, as well as hockey rinks. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these kids are going to go and start chipping away at the bricks or things like that for the hockey arena. There's not really much you can find, rolled up tape, hockey tape or whatever. So I told them they didn't have to be connected. The reason that I wanted them to be found in the moment is for them to realize, even if they had to go into their backyard or someplace really close, even if it was a last minute thing, that they can find value in the small places that they might not even look to see. So I was really happy with all of the things that the students shared with me. This is a big picture of all of the things. We have a restaurant here in town, baseball. I don't know. I don't think you guys can see my cursor. Can you? Yeah, you can. Baseball, diamond, a dance studio, somebody's grandmother's place. I have here a student's place, their parents' place of business, and they shared that with me, and it's a floral shop. I've got a gravel pit, a house, a barns, natural areas, parks near people's places. These are all special. Some kids did their rooms and they collected little things that had to do with their rooms. So I gave them these tins. I also gave them glass ones for the next time that I did it. But they're little tins from Michael's store, Michael's craft store, and they are from the wedding favor aisle. And you're going to find a lot of tins like that, or you can find them in other places in Michael's, and I'll show you where the kinds of boxes that my friend used. So it's similar to the photography assignment. Again, 5 things. The variety was incredible. I have hockey rinks, golf courses, barns, houses, relatives' houses, natural trails, cottages, camps, parents' places of work, ball fields, dance studios, backyards. Kids came and they collected from all these places, and they loved that they were given a little tin to fill. In addition to the little tins, they needed to do some analysis, okay, to make it a little more concrete. They needed to list the items and explain their significance. And under the list, they needed to answer the following about place. So how is place as a theme of geography different than locale or location? So relative or absolute. How is your perspective of this place different from how other people see this? That one was important. And why is action of examining perspective important when studying geography? So what you're going to realize is, even though this assignment takes up very little time in your class, unless you do it explicitly in your class and go to a region which is by your school, you can do that too. It takes up very little time, but they're getting a lot out of it. So the learning goes beyond the specific expectations. The conversation around how might new information or personal experience or bias changing priorities or even time shape how we perceive a place. So say, for example, if you did this assignment in elementary school or grade 9, how might it be different in grade 12? Would your place change? Would the little things that you collect change from that same place? And this kind of, you can even go into the history curriculum with that. Looking at stakeholders even, how would it change with other people? Say, for example, the gravel pit here, this student loved hanging out in his dad's business, like the gravel pit. I have a feeling his dad would collect different things, or an environmentalist might collect different things. So again, looking at perspective and how we look at things. And that kind of goes into the global citizenship of this conference, is that people look at things in different ways, and where different people are and what they've experienced and everything else. So those are all, for their conversations. But so how is your perspective different from other people? And then why is the action of examining perspective important when studying geography? And I can bet that you all know that is. Okay. So things to keep in mind. These are wedding favor tins from Michael's. I told you that already. You can get little things. I'm sure even at the dollar store, you'd be able to find little kinds of containers. And they were about, I think it was $25 for at least 30 of them, $25. So it wasn't too bad, but you can even have them put their items in a Ziploc bag if that was needed. I did the glass ones because they're pretty. You can see them and you can display them. That's why I chose to do them this way. Now, that being said, glass breaks, which we discovered in my classroom on the first day. There was a big and yeah, when we had to go and get a broom. Another thing to think about, students will put in all things. So I had a student bring back a container of mud, rocks, plant life, and water. because he gathered it from the creek. So you might want to, if you know that there might be students out there that will bring in water, you might want to tell them, okay, water is off limits, but that's okay. Will you allow students to manipulate items to fit into the box? I had a student cut a golf ball in half. Golf, he plays, I think, for the Golf Ontario, and that was important to him. And he cut the golf ball in half, which is fine. I didn't specify. So another student put in a puck or the threads off a baseball. It was very important to them, and that was fine. And obviously, because I didn't specify, they weren't dot marks or anything else like that. But think about that ahead of time. Do you want them to manipulate items, or do you want to keep things whole? Make them small enough. Remember, plant life breaks down, and we had some growth in some of the containers over time. Students may want items back. This is an incredibly personal assignment. It really is. It's more, I think, than anything I've ever put out there before. And they might want the items back. So I allowed students, if they wanted, to take the tins back with them, and it'll be a little memento of geography class. And hopefully it will get them to take senior geography classes later, right? My students, I found this interesting. I asked, we had a little extra time at the end of the year, and I asked them, okay, do you want to share your photography assignment, or would you rather share your little tin assignments? And they actually chose the photos rather than the items. I think because the photos can kind of speak for themselves, whereas the items they would have to talk about. And they were a little more private and intimate, the items in the tins. If you were going to ask them to share, I would probably ask them ahead of time, or tell them ahead of time that they are sharing these things. I had one student say she really didn't like the assignment at all, because she's an incredibly private person and didn't want to share anything about her life, even with a teacher. And that's fine. For those students, I would kind of say, you know what, you can find value in any space, even if it's not personal to you. So go out, look for a random park, and find 5 things that would capture the essence of that place. Okay, so that's easy enough to do. I wrote about it in a National Geographic blog post, this whole assignment. So if you want, you can scan that QR code and go to that as well and read a little bit more about it. Okay, let's see if this every time. Okay, so there's an exemplar. I put this out there through National Geographic, that blog, and I had a few different teachers follow up and do their own, which was absolutely fantastic. If you're going to be sharing it, can you share it with the hashtag concentrates of place? And the reason I ask that is because Tanya Shadrack, the one who started the concentrates of place project, would love to see it, and she follows that, and she wants to see everybody's little tins. She's an artist. I'm an artist. I'm a collector. I love these things. So make sure you hashtag it with that. So Misha Smith wrote on Instagram, and she tagged me, and she teaches 6th grade at Hawthorne Elementary in Boise, Idaho. Now, she said, reading these paragraphs gave me more insight into my students' personal lives than any other narrative writing we've done all year. And I would, again, totally agree. You learn a lot about students when they're sharing place and places that are important to them. Misha's planning on doing this activity at the beginning of the year, this year, as a way of getting to know her students. So it would incorporate the study of place, but then also be kind of an icebreaker and get to know you activity for her to get to know her students well. Now for her, she completed the exemplar first to show the students. So she collected something, she shared herself, and taught about the 5 themes of geography as well. Now, something that she did that I didn't do, which is pretty awesome, is she gave them the opportunity to create a model to represent the item if it didn't fit into the tin. So if you see here, there's a little Uno card. The Uno card would never fit into a tin like this, but this student created one because that was important to them in their life. So I think that's fantastic. If you want to do that, go for it. Her instructions were to also write a paragraph about each item, describing why they chose it and its importance to them. Explain how each item represents your special place, what memories it brings, and how it makes you feel. So you can go out and do something like that. And I'll show you another couple that she put out there. So that's what she wrote about. And this is another one. Okay, so it's the shooting range that this kid goes to. Catherine Stern is a good friend of mine that I got to know at camp years ago. I worked at camp with her. And she teaches 3rd and 4th grade at Eagles Plains Public School in Brampton, Ontario. And she has, again, grade 3-4, and she looked at different aspects of this as well. Now, she teaches things. She wanted me to let you know that she doesn't teach in units. She does a lot more experiential type learning with her and inquiry-based learning with her students. So she kind of goes on a theme and then fits different things in. So for science, it had to do with rocks, minerals, soils, plants, habitat, and she was able to learn about place in that way. So she taught them about place first. They looked at 3 distinct areas in their community, and she challenged them to create a little box to represent each of the places. So she didn't have them go home and do it. She actually had them collect them with her, and maybe possibly even you can do that in little groups. So they described and discussed what made it distinct from other areas. So the smells, soils, rocks, plants, animals, insects, all of those things about each distinct place. And yeah, they investigated in that way. I'm going to go to the next slide. After that, so she got all of these little boxes actually from Michael's as well, Michael's craft store. And she said she uses them also for dice games and math. And so they were a really good purchase. She said they figured out their own sense of place first. And then they moved on to the social science curriculum, which had to do with their own environment versus other regions. And then they looked a little more regionally about places in Canada, and kind of they used these different books in order to help them with that analysis between the two. So next steps for me. Anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay. And we can discuss it at the end. Next steps for me, there's lots of different next steps, I think. I'm always changing things up, and I would also recommend that you do that as well. I'm going to kind of do soundscapes and mapping and other related tangents within the curriculum, because I think we have the items, but I also think sound is important. And what different things sound like. You can get a sense of what a place is like through sound. So I was hoping to get little sound clips and have students map them as well, and maybe collect the sound from the same places that they're collecting the items from to give a little more depth of what the place is like. It can be busy sounds of a city versus the natural sounds of a meadow or a forest, or the quiet of the snow, all of those things. I'm going to ask, I know Jonathan's here, but I definitely have to ask Jonathan what he thinks about how to do that with ArcGIS. Yeah, that's what I was going to talk. I'll have to talk to you because I'm not that great at the ArcGIS thing yet. But I'm going to be doing that. I also think these are great ways to promote geography within your school. And I know geography isn't just maps, but a lot of other people who aren't geographers don't know that it's not just maps. So people need to know about connections and place. And if your incoming students aren't sure that this is geography, then there's a good guess that a lot of people around your school also don't know that this is geography. So using that, I'm going to make some kind of display. I have a lot of speakers in who are First Nations and from different communities. I have also had an Inuit speaker in. I've never had a Métis speaker in yet, but their voice is important and not ours, especially when it comes to place. It would be, I know some people would be like, well, what would they put in? We can't say that. We can't say that as settlers, and we need to make sure that other people, they can collect their own things and share that with us. So if you have a speaker, you can even put to these different speakers, if you had a special place in your life, what kind of things would you put in your tin? This would kind of have that representation and voice that we need from the Indigenous people here on Turtle Island. So you can also discuss people who are immigrants, as well as various perspectives between urban and rural residents, and looking at using the environment versus caring for the environment. I might also use this in my world issues class. That's a grade 12 course that I'm teaching this semester. And it's a little more about the higher order thinking, the ability to know that we're living geography. That was a realization that a lot of my students had after doing this assignment, is that, well, I'm actually part of geography. This is kind of what we are, and it's outside of that textbook aspect. So perspective can change between us and others in the same house, okay, with what we go through. We can revisit this, say in 4 years down the road, give them another tin and maybe go to the same place or go to another place, have your important places shifted. What would you collect? Think about your past, maybe even having somebody come back from university or college. What would you do now? What would you put in? And then that discussion, because they're grade 12s, why is that? How do we cope with a world full of not only different perspectives, but changing perspectives? I think that is key right now. That's something we as geographers know. We're critical thinkers, but I would say it's important to know that everything is changing all the time. Our perspectives change, and we have to keep that in mind, especially teaching our students to know that as well. Historical perspective, you can talk to the history teachers. Yeah, it would be, Chen. It would be good. Sorry, I'm reading in the chat there. Geography memories, and that's exactly what they are, and it kind of leads me into that historical perspective. If you know the history teachers in your school, you can bring it into the history class, kind of looking at, you know, what might have people, and only if you're talking about fictional characters or a generalized kind of community, what might they do? They can look at that, and again, changing perspective. An English teacher mentioned they could use that for character analysis. So I would suggest you're not collecting things for somebody who's living. Again, everybody has their own voice. It's not fair of us to assume what other people might collect. But if you're looking at a character, a fictional character, it would be a great way to storytell and bring this into your classroom. What might this character, what's important to them, what place is important to them, what kind of things would they collect? And it would get your students thinking about the character and even where the character would be. Okay. All right. And wrapping it up. I just want to encourage all of you to get outside. Okay, students have a right to experience the natural environment on a regular basis, not just our own children. And there are some kids that don't have the expertise that would ever get them outside. So if you can, even around your own schools, get them outside. We're all doing wonderful things in our classroom. Just because we're not sharing them online doesn't mean that we're not great. A lot of people who are online get a lot of attention, but know that you're doing great work where you are, and keep that in mind. Share the wins, though, and discard the ideas that don't work. Okay, where I'm discarding all the time. I'm 22 years in, and I've got fails. I've got a lot of fails in the classroom, and it's like, well, that didn't work. And you try something new the next time, and then you kind of gather all of these wonderful things that do work for you. Allow yourself to play with ideas and teaching methods. Racing through a curriculum doesn't mean that students are learning. For those of you who are teaching grade 9 geography in Ontario, this is especially important for you right now. We're going to de-stream kind of everybody all in one stream. I think it's great. We just need to figure out how to do it. And that means not racing through and making sure if you can make things more tangible, more kids are going to get things out of it, and they're going to remember it much longer. These assignments solidified many geographic ideas and concepts, and they help students to know how geography fits in their lives. I have a lot of students coming in to my class saying they absolutely hate geography, and I'm like, what? And yeah, because it's so dynamic for me. For them, a lot of the time is, and again, it's not their elementary teacher's fault. It's that they're not geographers. They don't really know that geography is beyond teaching students location and mapping and just, paper mapping. So it can be wonderful. Geography can be fantastic. And these assignments solidified many ideas and concepts that will take them further and show students how it fits in their lives. Oh, wait, sorry. And I missed one more. And we learn empathy by learning about other people's stories and the places that are important to them, which we may have passed a million times and not thought anything of. We learn the empathy, the value of every place, and the perspective of every person in this way. And if we can teach that on a smaller scale within our school and our class, hopefully students will go out there in their lives and be better critical thinkers and know that these kinds of ideas transfer to a global scale. Okay. Yeah. Taking in everything that they've learned, knowing that other people have these different perspectives. So, yeah, I'm trying to think. If you don't share, it doesn't mean you're not doing great. I mentioned that. Oh, and another assignment that I just thought of, it's kind of connected to this, but not really. It has to do with special place, but it has to do with a favorite tree. And I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be having a tree wall in my future class this semester. I'm going to ask them, because we do learn about deciduous and coniferous trees, I'm going to ask about their favorite tree. Everybody has a favorite tree. And even if you say that you don't, you do. You definitely have a favorite tree. And it could even be the one that you pass every day, or one that's been in your yard for a very long time. And I'm going to ask them to take a photo of this tree and talk about the value of that tree. So hopefully it will make them look at trees in a different way too. All right. And I think that's it. Okay, so I want to say thank you. And does anybody have any questions or ideas? I'm on Twitter at Braca_M. And I left the credits for this template, this slide template up, because it's important to give credit to the people who have created things. Yeah, Morgan, there are so many ways. I have a lot of friends in obviously, when you're teaching this long, you have friends in many different aspects of school and different subjects that can definitely use assignments like this. Thank you. I'm glad you're inspired. And even, you know what, even if it takes a little more time than what you think, I think, whatever you get back is definitely worth it. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah. Yes, it is deep learning. Oh, fantastic, Chan. I'm glad to hear. And you're right about the overwhelm of deep learning. It's almost like they're learning without even realizing that they're learning. Learning and making connections. All right. Yes. Deep conversations about contested place experiences. Not really, actually, Kelly. I wish you could, yeah. Can you expand on that question? I'm just thinking, you mean the differing, you know what, we have any, I'm thinking about your question. I'm processing. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our sense of place definitely changed during that time. We never really got into it as much. I think because it was new for me, I'm kind of adding new things on all the time. This was an assignment that I found because students didn't really want to share as much. I think this year I'm going to tell them that they're going to be sharing it as even just their pictures. And I might definitely, then we can have a discussion about it. But because they hadn't seen each other's assignments, they didn't quite know. I did as a teacher, but it's good for them to know the differing safe places. Now, I'm worried that if I mention they're going to have to share, what they share with me might not be as intimate. Does that make sense? Our home became our only safe place, and our sense of security and space was conflicted. Yeah. It was. Yep. Now, I didn't necessarily talk about safe places. I talked about special places. But safe places would definitely come into that. I found also that my grade 9s this year, because they were through the pandemic, so grade 6, I think, when things shut down, they were very different than the grade 9s that I've had in the past. And they were very open to sharing, and they really wanted the connection, but they were very open with place and space and the importance of things to them, but they wouldn't have been inhibited as I think people that I've had in the past, because they wanted that connection. But at the same time, yes, that's exactly it, Chan. So in the past, they would have been more selective because they wanted that connection. But then if I said other students would know about it, they might be more inhibited, which is what Chan is saying. So if they're coming from difficult situations, they're not going to be sharing that space. I'm even thinking if, the one photography assignment that I showed of that one student showing her grandma's safe space, that's a lot of information that she would be sharing with her peers that she doesn't even quite know yet in grade 9. And it's I don't know, it's interesting. There's so many different conversations that can tangent from this assignment. It depends on where you want to go with it and what you want to discuss. Dollar Street for world issues. Good to bring in Dollar Street. I don't think I've ever Try Dollar Street there, Jonathan. I'll have to look into that. Okay, good to know. Sorry, I'm just reading. I'm reading everything right now. Yeah. Yeah. So you understand the recovering environmentalist thing, right? Yeah. Highlights. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Chen. You're very, very welcome. Thanks all for joining me. And I think we'll wrap that up now. Any other questions before we take off? Yes, and you as well. And make sure if you do share online and if you are on Twitter, please share it with me for sure. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for listening, everybody.